Well, hi there. This is Craig Hane, and my students call me Dr. Del. And in the Invest in Yourself videos and the How to Go to College Without Debt, I told you I'd tell you my story. So this is my story now. This story was actually written by someone else after I told my story to them. And so they keep referring in here, of course, to Craig, which is me. And I'm not going to read this verbatim, but I'm going to kind of go through it. You can just listen to it and hear it from in my words, so to speak, or you can just download the PDF and read it if you don't want to hear me talk about it. I was born in 1938, and so I remember my birthday was 1 week before my third birthday was 1 week before Pearl Harbor. I was born November 30th, 1938, and Pearl Harbor was December, I think, 7th, 1941. Now, what I remember is right after the end of World War II in 1946, when I was 8 years old, something really incredible happened to me. I went to a summer camp for a Sunday school class at the Nazarene Church in Greencastle, Indiana. Mr. Theron York was my Sunday school teacher. I'll never forget it, of course. And I have very vivid memories of that. And of course, I have very vivid memories of World War II. Now, I'm not going to talk much about World War II, but we had rationing. My dad worked in a a war factory up in Indianapolis. I barely saw him ever. My mother worked full time. And we lived out in the woods, really, along a creek called Deer Creek, south of Greencastle, Indiana. And this was in the early 40s. We had a wood frame house. We didn't have any running water. We did have a well. I could go out and pump some water, which I did a lot. We had a kerosene stove we cooked on. Kerosene, that's what made, what's his name? The guy that founded Standard Oil, so rich. You'll remember that. Kerosene. And we had a pot-belly coal stove that we used for heat in one room. We actually had a 3-room house, but we only had heat in one room. We had what they call an outhouse. We had a 2-holer. That was fancy. One for me, it's a small one, a big one for the adults. Now, here's the point. I spent all my time when I was young in the woods, walking around in the woods and the creek, playing in the creek. And quite frankly, I considered this an idyllic life. I just absolutely loved it. We did have homegrown food mostly. I had good food. I never went hungry. I had warm clothes. They were nothing fancy. And I did have 2 neighbors that were very close by, with my Uncle Jack Davis and my Aunt Ines Davis. And Uncle Jack was a barber and also a builder. He'd build his own log cabin. He'd build his barn. They raised some cattle, 2 or 3 cows, some pigs and things. And quite frankly, they were kind of like parents to me. When my mom and dad were gone all the time, I'd go up to Uncle Jack and Aunt Ines. And Ines was really kind of the parent. I would spend a lot of time with her. And then my Uncle Jack was very good, as I'll tell you in a moment what he did for me that was really quite phenomenal. When I turned 5 years old, I was enrolled in a school in Putnamville, Indiana. And it was a 4-room schoolhouse with 8 grades. So we had 2 grades in each room. And my teacher was Miss Bernice Lewis. And I was the youngest child of my class. I was 5. We didn't have kindergarten back then in preschool. And my dad got me enrolled when I was 5 years old. And so I really was, in a way, the most immature child there. I couldn't skip, for example. I really couldn't sing. I'm colorblind, so I didn't color very well. But my Uncle Jack had taught me to count, and he used Cheerios. Now, Cheerios came out in 1942, and he used Cheerios and then dimes and pennies, and he taught me to count. He taught me the decimal number system, which of course is a marvelous invention our ancestors made, and it's what you use to do arithmetic and to count. And he taught me that. Now, he's not a math teacher. He was a barber and a builder, but he taught me to count. And so when I went in the 1st grade, Miss Lewis got all of us children up in the front of the class on a bench and was going to teach us to count because we hadn't been taught that. Well, when she got to me, I started counting, and most of the kids couldn't even count to 10. Maybe they were. I just kept counting. And she was amazed. She said, "Craig, how far can you count?" I said, "I don't know. I keep on going." And she said, "Well, you know how to count, obviously." And then she asked me to help her teach the other students to count, even though they were a little bit older than me. And so I actually had my first teaching experience when I was 5 years old. I was helping my other students learn to count. And it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. And in fact, it was a good thing because I was behind them in every other thing except counting. Couldn't color, called them colorblind. I couldn't sing. I couldn't even skip. I wasn't coordinated at that point in time. So that was wonderful. Now, I mentioned that I went to this when I was 8 years old. I went to this wonderful summer camp for Sunday school with Theron York. And he taught me something that changed my life. It really, and by the way, no one can ever live anyone else's life. I'm not telling this story so you can do what I did. I'm using this to demonstrate things that I think you can learn from and maybe help you improve your life. Now, obviously, we learned the things that are often taught in Sunday school. We learned about the golden rule. We learned about love thy neighbor. We learned, Jesus loves you. We learned about salvation, whatever that meant. I don't think I really understood it, but kind of an idea. But he taught me something that was the most important thing for me. And Theron taught me that summer, Mr. York taught me that what you believe is what's going to happen to you. Your beliefs will determine your future in ways you'll never understand. Things will then happen if you believe. Now, he said it's very important. It's not what you want to happen. It's what you believe will happen. And that's really tricky. I've written other papers on how you can structure your beliefs. But the bottom line is I walked in the woods a lot and I daydreamed a lot. And I had these imaginations about things that would happen to me. And I believed they would happen. I would tell myself in my mind stories and so on. Now, at the end of that 3 weeks, we were invited to come down to the altar and be saved. And I was. Dr. Reverend Newby invited us down. And I went down to the altar and was saved, whatever that means. I'm not going to get into that. But the bottom line is I believed in the things I'd been taught. I believed in the golden rule. I believed in love thy neighbor. I believe in, the Good Samaritan story. And all of that. But most importantly, perhaps, was I believed that what you believe. It's kind of like, what's the story? If you have the belief of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain, something like that. But anyway, what you believe. Now, in 1950, my idyllic life ended. I was 12 years old. The war was over, and my dad no longer worked at the war plant, and he took a job in the big city. I call it, quote unquote, Greencastle, about 5,000 population. But to me, that was a big city. They had 2 movie theaters, for crying out loud. And so we moved to town. We lived in a little apartment up above a restaurant near DePaul University, right next to the campus. So I got to at least see a lot of the college students. But I was what everybody would have thought of a hick from the sticks, okay? Because I grew up in the woods. And my friends then that I started making at Greencastle were city kids. They had a very different upbringing than I had. And so I was kind of like the country bumpkin, okay? I was the hick from the sticks. But thanks to my Uncle Jack, I was good at arithmetic. In fact, I was good at a lot more than arithmetic. He taught me practical geometry too. And as I'll tell you, I've actually created a set of Uncle Jack videos where I teach parents how they can teach their children not only arithmetic and the number system, but practical geometry. And it's quite something that my uncle, and it's still very good today, what I learned for a young child. So I actually then knew math in a way that the city kids, the sophisticated kids, didn't really know. In fact, I often knew math more than my teachers knew, thanks to my Uncle Jack. And very practical math. He wasn't a math teacher. It was very practical stuff, but very worthwhile. And that's when I learned how important math could be. Now, the facts of the matter are, I come from a working family. I have lots of aunts and uncles and cousins, and nobody in my family had ever gone to college. Remember, this is in the 40s. Now we're up to 1950. These were all very hardworking men and women. They were very intelligent. They had a lot of humor in life, a lot of love. It was a wonderful family. I have wonderful memories of my childhood. I was very lucky, very fortunate to have a good family. There's nothing a child can have that's better than a good family. And I feel so sorry for children that don't have a good family. Your parents might be rich, but if they're not loving and if you don't have a good, close family, I think that's a handicap. In any event, they never gone to college, but they all believed in college. And they told me, my parents, they said, Craig, you're going to go to college someday. And college that's that's going to open up wonderful life for you. They thought that college was something magical. And I guess in a way it might be. Well, like I mentioned, I had learned practical geometry and arithmetic from my Uncle Jack. He was a barber and a builder, and he knew practical arithmetic. He didn't know the terminology. For example, to build a square, and I teach this in one of my videos, if you want a square angle, you use the 3-4-5 rule. He never used the word Pythagorean theorem, but that's what it really is, 3, 4, 5. He used string all the time. And he taught me how to make a third of a square angle, a half, and I teach all that in the Uncle Jack videos. You ought to go get them and look at them if you're trying to teach a young child practical stuff. Anyway, I had a vision at that point, and I had a belief, thanks to Uncle Jack, that math was fun and it could be valuable. Uncle Jack told me, Craig, if you can really learn a lot of math, more than I know, really learn a lot of math, you're going to have a very, very successful life, because math is like a second language. It's used in almost everything. And if you want to be, especially if you want to go to college, and especially if you want to be like an engineer or a scientist, you need math. So I was very good at math all through the 8th grade. I usually led my class. And again, I thank Uncle Jack. I wasn't smarter than my classmates, believe me. And I know them well. I remember their names. I have visions of them, and I talk to them, and I would teach them math. I wasn't any smarter anywhere. They could learn it. Once I taught it to them, they'd learn it just as well as I did. But then something happened to me in the 9th grade. I took what's called algebra, 9th grade algebra. And guess what? I didn't do well in it. I struggled. And because of that, I didn't like it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is awful. And I was talking to my counselor, Mr. Skelton, about it. Remember now, I'm in the 9th grade now. And I was talking to him, and he said, Craig, you come from a working family, and that's really the life you're going to have. He said, you didn't do well in algebra, so don't plan on going to college, because if you can't do well in algebra, you're not going to be college material. And so he recommended I take shop. And that was what they used to call industrial training, shop. And I did. And he said, you're going to be a working man, just like your family, your aunts and your uncle and your dad and so on. And wow, I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, oh my golly, what about my belief? Because I believed in math. I believed that math, my Uncle Jack had told me, math will be the open sesame for all sorts of things. So I didn't know what to do. And I was pretty depressed, actually, the summer before my sophomore year. And then my sophomore year, a fantastic thing happened. I got really, really lucky. I had a marvelous teacher, Miss Madonna O'Hare. I mean, I just remember vividly, I could just almost see like I'm there. And she taught me geometry. And she taught geometry really well, how to prove theorems and what it was all about. And I loved it. I loved it as much as I loved my Uncle Jack's teaching. And I did really well in geometry, made a good grade in it. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I do like math. I like geometry. I don't like algebra. Algebra, yeah, that's bad, but I like geometry. Well, in my junior year, guess what? I had the same teacher that I had for algebra my freshman year. Same teacher. And I was struggling to get, but now it was different. I was aggressive. I asked questions now, and he didn't like it. And so we didn't get along. In fact, I was a troublemaker because I asked too many questions. Well, how do you show me this quadratic formula? Where does it come from? How do you prove it? Like you prove things in geometry. Well, Craig, don't ask that. You don't prove things. This is it. Just do it. And if you made a careless error, minus 10. And I make a lot of careless errors. I always have, and I probably always will. I make a lot of careless errors. No doubt I'll make some on this video, careless errors. And it's just the way it is. Well, I got a bad grade again. When I say a bad grade, it was like a B minus or something. But to me, that was a bad grade. And so once again, but now I thought, whoa. I'm good at geometry. I like geometry. I'm not very good at algebra, but I think maybe it's because Mr. Harmon, maybe not a great teacher. So I went to Miss O'Hare for advice. So lucky in life to be able to do this. And I'm giving you advice now in some of these videos I'm doing. And I said, what should I do? I did good in geometry, you know that, but I don't do well in algebra. She said, well, now she couldn't say much because he was the chairman of the department. And so in a sense, I guess he was her boss. So she says, well, Craig, why don't you go to DePaul University your senior year and take algebra there as a special student. You can enroll as a special student. Well, I never heard of that. Didn't know anything about it. And so gee. So I went and talked to Mr. McCammon, the principal, and he said, "Oh no, Craig, you shouldn't do that. You've done, you didn't do well in algebra in high school, so you're going to do even worse in college. You're going to embarrass the school." He told me I would embarrass the school because I made bad grades in algebra, and I'm going to do even worse in college. That was their formula. If you didn't do whatever you did in high school, you'd do worse in college. That's what he told me. Well, my dad, who had an 8th grade education, by the way, but was a very intelligent guy, very successful as a father and a breadwinner, he went in and talked to Mr. McCammon, and I use that in quotes. I don't know what was said, but all I know is Mr. McCammon agreed to let me do it. And I could speculate on what my dad might have said to him, but anyway, Mr. McCammon agreed. So I went over to DePaul, and I enrolled as a special student. And guess what? They made a mistake. There was a freshman algebra class for college freshmen, and then there was a more advanced one for college sophomores called college algebra back then. Remember, this is 1954 or something like that, or 55. Anyway, they put me in the sophomore class. But it was a mistake, actually. They should have put me in the freshman class. Well, they didn't. Well, it turns out I had a professor there by the name of Dr. Clint Gass. And in fact, I think it was his first or second year at DePaul. And he's a very tall, droll man, but he was a great teacher, just like Miss O'Hare been a great teacher. And miracle of miracles, I got an A. in college algebra, sophomore algebra. And by the way, I was 16 years old when I enrolled that year because I was the youngest kid in my high school class. I was 16 years old, and most of the students were 18 and 19 years old. I had about 3-year difference. And so I got to talk to a lot of the students and so on. It really helped me a lot. And I got this A. In fact, I'll never forget going back and after it was over, and I went in and I told Mr. McCammon and Mr. Skelton, the counselor, I said, "Well, Craig, how did you do in math?" I said, "Well, guess what? I got an A." "You what?" I said, "I got an A. Look here, I got an A." Now they didn't understand it. It's like, "You got an A." Well, then I told them, I'm pretty honest and straightforward. I said, "Mr. Harmon's a lousy teacher. Mr. O'Hare's a good teacher. Mr. Harmon's a lousy teacher. I had a good teacher, Dr. Clint Cash." Well, nothing came of it. They ignored it. Mr. Harmon stayed there and so on. And I tell you what, I think it's a tragedy for a lot of Greencastle High School students. Now, I don't know who's watching this video, but if you've had a bad experience with math, don't blame yourself. It might be your fault, but could very well be that you took the wrong course, didn't have a very good teacher. Could be a lot of things. I will guarantee you, if you take my math that I tell you about and take the right content in the right sequence and go about it self-paced, I almost guarantee you'll do well. It's a rare student that can't learn math when it's taught properly and when the right content's taught. Okay, long story short, I went all through high school and I worked, by the way. I started working when I was 12 years old. I set pins in a bowling alley, delivered papers, I mowed lawn, did all sorts of things. I saved money. My family believed in saving money. And by the time I graduated from high school in 1956, I actually had enough money for tuition for 4 years at a good college. And there was a great college in Ohio named Oberlin College. In fact, it was rated #1 or #2 in liberal arts in the whole United States at that time. It isn't anymore today, but it was then. It was highly rated. And I got in. Now, there's a long story behind that. I do believe, though, that one of the reasons is Dr. Gass probably gave him a tremendous recommendation because I had mediocre grades in high school. I was not even in the National Honor Society in high school. The teachers vote you in, and most of the teachers in high school didn't like me. I guess I was a troublemaker. I did ask a lot of questions. I'll admit that. And students that ask hard questions and don't let the teachers off lightly sometimes don't like. Now, I had 2 or 3 teachers in high school that liked me, but several that didn't. Okay. Well, I went to Oberlin College. Now, they didn't give me a scholarship, but I had enough money for tuition and room and board. And what I started doing right away is I took math, of course. I took a lot of things. I actually did a double major, English and math, but I took math and I started tutoring my fellow students. In fact, I started in high school. When I was a junior in high school, and I told you I took geometry in my sophomore year, I tutored the captain of the football team my junior year. and his mother paid me to do it because they had money. And I got paid to tutor math. And wow, you can make a living doing something you love to do. I mean, I love to tutor. I always say, whatever you do in life, if you get really good at something, you'll probably be able to find somebody else, if they want to do it too, will pay you to do it. One way to make a good living, a decent living, is tutoring people to do something they want to do, whatever it is: music, art, math, you name it, athletics, anything. Anyway, uh, my sophomore year, they hired me as what they call a problem station instructor, and they started paying me. And so I basically put myself through college through Oberlin with virtually no debt because I had some money saved, and also then I got paid. And by the way, in today's dollars, I was probably making $25, $30 an hour. In today's dollars, it wasn't that much back then, of course, but we've had inflation 3% a year. Anyway, here's the other thing I found out at Oberlin. If you get good at math, basic math, the right math, that helps you in any other technical subject. So I would go take theoretical physics, physical chemistry. I'd take the toughest courses. And because I knew the math, it was easy. So I could do good in all these other courses because of math. Math, by the way, has historically been the great math barrier. Now, as I will tell you in other places, in other videos, it isn't anymore because of the modern tools. Math today is incredibly much easier than it was back then because of the modern tools. We start, you already see me in one of the other videos talk about the calculator. Well, that's just the beginning of it. There's other more very powerful tools. This has been around about 40 years, this kind of technology, but there's another technology been around about 10 years that just changes math altogether. And I talk about a lot of that in other things. Well, anyway, I went home. I always talked to Dr. Gass in the summer when I would go home. And so I was, right after high school, it's a long involved story. I was an English major as well as a math major, and they needed a math teacher at a local high school, Western Reserve High School in Wakeman, Ohio. And they found out about me through an English teacher. And anyway, I taught 1 year on a temporary 1 year permit. I had no math education classes. Oberlin didn't even have math education classes. And nobody graduated from Oberlin went and taught high school. That Oberlin was way supposedly above that. So I taught high school for a year, loved it, had a great experience, loved the kids, loved Wakeman, loved Western Reserve High School. But then I was home that summer. So 4 years at Oberlin, 1 year teaching high school. Now I'm home for the summer. I'm talking to Dr. Gass, as I always did when I was home for the summer. He says, "What are you going to do now, Craig?" I don't know. Maybe I'll be an actuary. I thought about it, although I didn't think I really wanted to. And mostly my life, I want to do things I enjoy doing. I have to admit, I have to tell you something, and I think everybody should be that way. Do something you really like to do. And some things you like to do, you get paid for. Anyway, he said, I'm going on a sabbatical next year. Won't you teach in my place while I'm gone? Second semester. I said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, Oberlin had a really good math department compared to everywhere else. And he said, "You know more math than I do." But he says, "Why don't first semester you go to graduate school at Indiana University, which is 40 miles away from Greencastle in Bloomington, Indiana." I never thought about that. I never considered going to grad school. Wasn't too sure what that would mean. And he said, "Yeah, I'll go to grad school. See what you think of it. Maybe you like it." Fine. So I went to grad school, went down in September and enrolled. They thought I was crazy because I hadn't applied earlier, but they enrolled me, and they gave me a job, by the way, teaching math right away. Anyway, I enrolled in grad school, and all I can tell you, now this was in the early 1960s, and there was a lot of money flowing into grad schools because of Sputnik and all of that, and a lot of grad students there. And I had a ball. I loved it. It was fun. Math is one of these things, once you start learning to do it, it's fun. It's like anything. It's hard in the beginning, maybe. You struggle in the beginning, but once you get going on it, it's fun. And so it was a lot of fun. And when you do math, and I teach this other places, you got to have unfocused time. You study for a while, and then you stop and go do other things and let your subconscious work. That's how you do math and learn math. And so my unfocused time was I got a motorcycle and rode it. I went to a lot of parties. I played rugby, and a lot of other things. I had a lot of fun, and math was fun. And I didn't get a master's degree because I hate tests. I don't like math tests by and large, and you had to take a test to get a master's. I didn't get one, but you don't need a master's. Back then you did to get a PhD. A PhD means Doctor of Philosophy. And to do that, you got to write a thesis. You got to do research. And that's what I did. I had several professors. It's a long story, and I tell this on one of my other videos. Whenever you're studying at a university in a subject, befriend your professors and go ask them questions, but ask good questions. And I tell you other places how to do that. You want to ask good questions. Anyway, I had a lot of professors that liked me and wanted me to work. So I got a PhD in what's called algebraic number theory. And so now I'm 27, 28 years old. I just married. In fact, right at the same time I was dating a wonderful woman, and we got married. We've been married 54 years now. Been a wonderful life. And I was asked at Indiana State University, which is in Terre Haute, Indiana, as a teacher's college really, to come over and teach advanced math. So then they hired me as an associate professor. Normally it would be assistant professor, but they started me as associate. It was a really good job. In today's dollars, I had about $120,000 a year for a 6-hour teaching load. Taught there 3 years. Then there's an engineering school in Terre Haute called Rose-Hulman. It used to be Rose Poly, it's called Rose-Hulman now. And they hired me then. I taught there 4 years. So I taught 7 years. I was a math professor in Terre Haute. But what happened was, and again, it's a long story, but when I left Indiana State, went to Rose-Hulman, I also got interested in business. And so, and I'm an adventurer, really. Quite frankly, I don't necessarily recommend this to anybody. Some people are, some aren't. I always like new things. I'm an adventurer. I'll always like to do new things. And so already now, by the time I don't know, in my early 30s, I've taught all the math courses from 8th grade through graduate school, first year grad school, many times. And quite frankly, after I've taught a course 2 or 3 times, I kind of get bored with it. By the way, I don't think you understand math till you teach it. Everything, when I would teach a subject, whatever it was, then I'd understand it better, because you got to understand it to explain it to someone, unless you're a lousy teacher. And to me, and a lot of math teachers are lousy teachers, by the way, but there are good ones. Anyway, I decided to take the math I knew and apply it to the real world, not just to university. So I went into business. I went into business. My first business was my brother and I bought 3 auto parts stores. We had a big auto parts operation. In fact, made a lot of money right away. And then I built Action Dragway, 8th Mile drag strip in Terre Haute, NHRA sanctioned, great drag strip. Then I formed a gasoline company, racing gasoline, to build racing gasoline, because that's back when they were cutting back on lead and all that. And then I developed something called the Hane Dynabrain, which was tested racing engines on dynamometers, water brake dynamometers. Well, that all happened over the decade of the 70s. And quite frankly, a lot of things happened and I went broke, if you want to know the truth. By the way, best thing that ever happened to me, because that's a long, involved personal story, but I went broke. But by that time I had children at home and I had a wife, and I love my children, I love my wife. And so head down, I said, what can I do? Well, what I love doing is training. I love teaching, but I don't want to teach the same thing over and over. So I started an industrial training company called Hane Training. And the first course was how to troubleshoot op-amp circuits, operational amplifiers, and then how to troubleshoot digital circuits, and how to troubleshoot microcomputers, and on and on. And over the next 2.5 decades, we trained thousands of skilled tradesmen all over North America. And it wasn't just me. I started hiring instructors, training them, and so on and so forth. You go to hanetraining.com and you can see it. I sold a company years ago, but it's still got a website up that you can go look at. We taught about 50 different workshops. Now here's the deal. Math is the foundation of all of them. And what made my company so successful is we'd go in and teach them the math they needed to know. Very few of these skilled tradesmen knew the math they needed. They hadn't been taught. And then they couldn't learn. You can't learn hydraulics if you don't know certain basic math, or electronics, or whatever it might be. So we would teach them the math they needed. And by the way, the math you need, workforce math, is very easy if it's taught properly. So that's what we did. Now, ever since I had trouble my freshman year in high school, 1952, my goal has been, oh boy, somebody ought to do something about math education. The books are not very good. A lot of the teachers aren't. Some are, but most of them aren't. And then when I was at Rose-Hulman in 1972, they came out with the first scientific calculator, the HP 35. And all of a sudden, things we were teaching, like slide rules and log tables and was obsolete. And so now math is getting even more obsolete than what it ought to be. And then in 2009, Steve Wolfram, great genius, introduced a tool that we call Wolfram Alpha. And this revolutionizes how math should be taught. Absolutely revolutionizes. And so I said and think, oh my goodness, now we have the internet, we got all sorts of technologies. I said, I think maybe, and by the way, I'd made quite a bit of money over the years and had done a lot of traveling. And so in 2008, I was 70 years old. And I was tired of traveling, frankly. And I said, oh, I can do what I've always wanted to do. And so I decided to put together a training company, Triad Math Inc. We incorporated it. I started just developing some first I used CD-ROMs and stuff. Then we incorporated in 2011. Now here's the deal. Belief is everything. I've said that earlier. That's what I learned from Theron York. And by the way, I could go through and tell you 10 or 12 different things in my life I believed would happen. No idea how it would happen, and then they happened. That happened over and over and over for me. And I think it can happen to anybody. So anyway, what I know today is that anybody can learn practical math, what I call workforce math. And you can learn it less than a year, thanks to the scientific calculator. So that's what I start teaching people, workforce math. And you've heard me talk about that on other videos, so I don't have to go through it again. But what about then if you want to go beyond workforce? What if you want to go into science and engineering? Well, Wolfram Alpha has eliminated the math barrier. There was a time when calculus was a great math barrier because of all the manual tools you had to learn. You don't need them anymore. You got the power tool, Wolfram Alpha. Differential equations, same thing. And I talk about that on other videos. And so I have developed now a 6-tier program which takes a student all the way, if they're post-elementary, they basically got to know arithmetic. If they understand basic arithmetic, the decimal number system, then I take them all the way through differential equations. And by the way, you can have a student that's 12 years old today and start on that, and they can be all the way through calculus and differential equation time are 16, 17 years old before they can go to college. And then they're really much better prepared than the students that are studying the current, basically obsolete program. And so I believe the future for humanity is very bright if we do the right things. It's because of modern technologies. We can eliminate poverty now. We can clean up the environment, and I won't get into that on this video, but there's lots of things we can do today we're not doing that we can be doing. But it takes educated people. It takes people that can understand the technologies and can apply the technology appropriately. It's not being done today, hardly at all. In fact, a lot of the things we're doing today are really hurting the environment, and they're hurting humanity, and they're not helping people. And that all needs to change. And I believe it can change, but it's up to you. When I say you, it's up to the younger generation. It's up to me to help teach you what I think you need to know, particularly as a foundation. If you're going into anything technical, now if you're going to be an artist or musician, I can't help you. But if you're going to do anything technical, this is what you need. And so, as I said in another video, and it's on this page probably, invest in yourself. Have faith in yourself. Have a belief that you can do it. I'm telling you that you can do it. Okay, you say, well, wait a minute, I'm skeptical. All right, go to vastly-superior-math.com, MS. Do it. Spend $15 on the program and $10 on the calculator. That's $25 and about 25 hours of your time, and you're going to be amazed at what you learn. Now, that's just the start of it, but it gets your mind right. It gets your beliefs, oh, I can do this. Like what Dr. Gass did what Miss O'Hare did for me. I can do it. Oh, I can do it. And I don't care if you failed at math. I don't care if you don't like math. I don't care if you're afraid of math. I don't care what bad experience you've had. Get that out of your mind. Forget it. You had a bad experience like I did. I had a bad experience. I overcame it. I was lucky. I want to be your luck. I want to do for you what Miss O'Hare and Dr. Gass did for me. They're gone now. I'm 82 years old making this video. Those people are, they're long gone. I believe they know what's happening. I believe they're gone from the physical universe. Let's put it that way. That's another story. By the way, the latest science, in my view, proves that there's a non-physical universe where the soul resides in the afterlife. That's another story. So there's so much more I could tell you. And I do have a lot of other videos, by the way, to talk about a lot of these things we're talking about. I've gone over this. It's probably already gone way too long. I probably bored the heck out of you. But I want you to know who you're dealing with. I want you to know why I'm doing it. I'm not doing this to make money. Believe me, money's got nothing to do with it. I'm doing it because I love it, and I love my children, my grandchildren. I just love children in general. I love my students. And the good news is it's all online. It's all automated. So I don't have to, that's how I can deliver it. Our automated system is automated. And so I can literally train 10,000 students. Now, obviously I'm not doing it one-on-one with them. It's not individual. Once in a while I get to meet a student. If a student can come and ask me a good question, I'll do a Zoom meeting with them. I love that. Now, I can't do it with 10,000 students, but I can do it 2 or 3 times a week. So if you become one of my students, and we have a forum, you go to the forum and ask questions, and probably somebody else is going to answer. But if you ask a good enough question, and I think that, hey, I don't have someone else on the forum to answer it, and it's not quick to answer, I may do a Zoom meeting with you and record it so other people can watch it. They can hear the question and they can see the answer. And I love doing that. How long this will go on? I don't know. I can't predict the future. I have no idea. I feel very good. I'm healthy. I feel great. I think I'm going to live a lot longer. I think I'm going to be doing this a lot longer. I don't know. None of us know. Nothing is for sure in life. But in any event, that's my story. And I just hope it's inspiring to you and tells you what you can do. On another video I did where I'm talking about how to go to college with no debt, I talk about my 3 children and how one went to college, got a Ph.D., one went and got a regular BA and went into, and another one didn't go to college at all. And they're all very successful. Different strokes for different folks. There's no one size fits all. So anyway, I probably said more than enough now. And so I'm going to end this recording. And I hope that you got something out of it. And I hope that you invest in yourself, whether it's with me or not, but you do it and have a very successful life. Okay, that's what I want you to do. Bye-bye.